I'm going to, well, it's always in the order that I'm not thinking, is call to order and then have welcome and introduction. So, Alan, your mouth isn't full.
Alan Zelenka, STBG counsel.
Hannah Parks, minute recorder.
I'm Gary Gillespie from the LTD Fighting 5th District.
Gary Wildfish, LTD Board.
Aurora Jackson, LTD.
Franny Brindle, ODOT.
Brenda Wilson, Lane Council of Governments.
Petra Sheets, Administrator, City of Coburg.
Patty Giannoni, City Councilor, Coburg.
Tim Elsey, Lane County Public Works Director.
Sid Lykin, Lane County Board of Commissioners.
Gino Grimaldi, City of Springfield.
Hillary Wiley, City of Springfield.
Christine Lundberg, Mayor of Springfield, and let's start there and go around.
Dan Collister, Lane Council.
Tom Schwartz, LTD.
David Reeser, Lane County.
Emma Newman, City of Springfield.
Tom Boyett, City of Springfield.
Kelly Clark with the Lane Council of Governments.
Teresa Brand, Point at LTD.
Jeff Crane, City of Coburg.
Jeff Lanza, Friends of Trees.
Eric Burke, Friends of Trees.
Liz Butterfield, City of Springfield.
Steve Gilbranch, Lane Council of Governments.
Ellen Career, Lane Council of Governments. Kelly Hale, LTD. Kate Reed, LTD Board.
Rob Zako, Better Eugene Springfield Transportation.
Rob Interfeld, City of Eugene.
Hello, Jackie McAlonis, Governor's Office.
And Paul Thompson, Lane Council of Governments.
Great, welcome everyone. So the next I have on the two new people walking in. Okay, we'll give them a moment to get partway here. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Lucy Vickers, the late mayor.
Not yet. Yeah, that didn't come out. We're just getting started. We don't want to get long. And the lady, would you like to introduce yourself?
No.
Okay.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm Michelle O'Leary. I'm a River Road citizen.
Great.
Okay, great, thank you very much. The next thing I have on the agenda is to approve the March 2nd, 2017 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please vote. Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that carries. Are there adjustments to the agenda or announcements? Yes.
Madam Chair, we have a guest speaker here today. They are under agenda item 6G, and I would ask whether you would consider moving them up to before 6A.
Oh, okay, before 6A, okay.
First. That makes sense.
First, yes, before we get into it. Yeah.
Okay,
Good idea.
okay, great. Okay, so we shall do that.
And I have an announcement.
Yes.
Yes. So Monday, which is the 10th?
Yep.
Yes. Governor Kate Brown will be in our area, and she is going to be looking and focusing on a transportation project that I think is near and dear to our hearts, and that's the Beltline.
Yep.
So you're all invited and encouraged to attend. The meeting is going to be, she'll be doing the transportation discussion about 2:30. I'll send out an invitation through Paul, so you'll be able to get the invitation, but it will be at the stockpile site on the northwest quadrant of the Delta Beltline interchange, where you see those big piles of material. There'll be room for folks to park and wear comfortable shoes, but you're invited and encouraged to attend. Invitation in the email. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, any other announcements? Okay. The next item is comments from the audience, and I have one sign-up card, and that is for Rob Zako.
Good morning, Chair Lundberg, members of MPC. I'm Rob Zako, Executive Director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. Good morning. You all know the secret of communication, right? Repetition, repetition, repetition. You tell people what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and you tell them what you told them. So while we're still trying to save lives, Best is going to keep coming to you and telling you to save lives. You have before you the Transportation System Action Plan for adoption. It's got a vision in it. You discussed that last time. We urged you that vision without action is hallucination. And this plan has a lot of good ideas in it. It's a step in the right direction. We support it. But it's pretty weak on action. As far as we can tell, the main thing that you're directing staff to do is hire Steve back here. Steve? He's a good guy, but Steve all by himself is not going to save lives. So we're going to keep asking you, what can you do around this table to save lives? We've got 3 specific recommendations. The first one's pretty easy. This is a big deal. I don't know if they're doing this elsewhere in the country, but here, it's not just Springfield, it's not just Eugene, it's not just Lane County. You're coming together saying that safety is important. You're adopting a plan to put some teeth into that. Have your staff put out a press release. Plan a press conference. Not just you, Mayor Lundberg, or you, Mayor Vinnis, but several of you come together. If it's a bipartisan, a nonpartisan kind of thing, that demonstrates to the public a lot more commitment than you doing it individually. It's an easy thing you can do. Ask your staff to promote that you're making this action today. Second, money. You around this table have money you can spend. You're going to have a windfall of CMAQ money, congestion management, air quality. There may be opportunities there to direct some of that money to safety projects. We don't know if that's necessarily the case, but as you spend money that you have, talk about opportunities to save lives and make that a priority. Third thing, speaking of money, I think the last time the federal gas tax was raised was when a guy named Bill Clinton was president in 1993. Adjusting just for inflation, that federal gas tax today buys 40% less than it did in 1993. And then fuel efficiencies increase. We may get a state transportation package. We probably will. Some of that money will come locally. But the reality looking forward is that around the country, local areas and regions are having to take care more of their own. We saw Los Angeles recently pass a $120 billion transportation funding package, getting more than 2/3 of the votes of the voters. Seattle is funding transit. Portland's looking to take care of their own. Here locally, our track record has been mixed. Lane County went out for a vehicle registration license fee a couple years ago. Didn't work so well. There have been efforts to get local gas taxes, haven't worked so well. This is all speculative, but looking forward, if you come together, not each jurisdiction working separately, but saying, what are your joint needs? Is safety one of those? There may be opportunities to persuade voters that we have some needs that we need to address. And Bess would love to support that if that should happen. So, media release, press conference, spend money you have, and look to the future for more money. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks, Rob.
Okay. That was the only sign-up that I had. The next item on the agenda is actually 6G. Yes. So we have Friends of Trees.
Yeah, you can roll. I can roll it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having us. I'm Eric Burke with Friends of Trees, Eugene Director. Jeff Lanza, Planting Program Manager of Friends of Trees. Today we're here to talk about our collaboration with Oregon Department of Transportation on tree planting projects, initially starting in Portland and now in ODOT Region 2 here in Eugene, Springfield. So next slide, please. A little bit about Friends of Trees. We are a community building nonprofit, a regional nonprofit from, we work in about 20 cities from Vancouver, Washington, and Clark County down here to Eugene and Springfield. We have 2 main programs. Our Neighborhood Trees program is street and yard tree planting, and our Green Space program plants trees in parks, natural areas, roadsides, like what we'll talk about today. The main focus of all our programs is engaging volunteers to enjoy volunteering and do work that leads to a tangible result in a fun and safe environment. Next, please. So a little bit about the history of our collaboration. It started in 2010. There was a lot of impetus to plant trees along I-205 particularly between the bike path that follows about 17 miles of it and I-205 itself. FOT approached ODOT about 2010 pilot planting of 100 trees. And many of you know the great leader, Gail Achterman. She was involved in the formation of this program and came to one of the original plantings before she passed away in 2012. Senators Merkley and Wyden, many other electeds have attended plantings in this project. It eventually grew into a 7-year project. It started out as 3 years of planting, turned into 4 years of planting, and then additional 3 years of maintenance, follow-up watering and weeding. Over the life of the project, 4,800 trees and native shrubs were planted with 4,000 volunteers. Doing about 16,000 volunteer hours. We're still monitoring and collecting mortality data to see how the project's doing, which trees do better than others. I wanted to show you the top picture there is our first planting locally. That is Beltline and Roosevelt Boulevard to the northwest of that. There's a big field with a trailer park behind it there. The lower picture is this January, our Bob Straub Parkway planting, and very cool. The guy standing on the bucket there is Jim Straub, who is the grandson of Governor Bob Straub, and you can see the little girl in the background in pink is his daughter Sophia, who's the great-granddaughter of Governor Bob Straub. And I learned from Jim at that planting that his family still owns a lot of forest land around Springfield that they manage, and that his grandfather was a forest economist. I didn't know that. Next slide, please. Funding for the I-205 project primarily came from Portland Metro's capital grant program, as well as East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District, and some grants. A big breakthrough that our executive director, Scott Fogarty, has worked on for years, especially with folks in Bureau of Environmental Services in Portland, is seeing trees as capital assets as part of projects. And so these were the first projects where trees were seen as capital assets. And so that allows funding for landscaping to be attached to capital improvement projects. Another way that some funding was addressed, we hired minority-based contractors, particularly Verde in Portland, to do a lot of the maintenance work on these projects that supplemented the volunteer work that was done. There was great recognition for the success of this project. Both Friends of Trees and ODOT received national recognition and awards for this project. Next slide, please. Moving to our local work, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff for a little bit.
Thanks, Eric. Good morning, everyone. Feels like afternoon for some reason to me, but it's still morning, another 11 minutes. I'm going to talk very briefly about just more specific details on our project logistics and our events. Locally, we started talking with ODOT staff probably around 2011, give or take, and it was around 2013, Kevin Finch and others with the local ODOT staff here started to help us, assist us in scouting and citing locations that would be appropriate considerations for what we had in mind and what we had done up in Portland. So Kevin was a great lead contact. He ran the ideas through the real estate department, safety engineers, whatnot, and came up with a number of sites, and we landed on the Dana Bow and Roosevelt site that we planted our first pilot project in March of 2014. There's just some tabulations there to date, numbers. When we plant on these sites, there's a number of considerations. Historically in the past, transportation corridors had a single purpose, and it's an important purpose to provide transit and get us around efficiently and safely. But in more recent times, we're looking at multi-use ideas of these spaces, and in particular, there's some underutilized real estate along ODOT's holdings that could probably look at other benefits, and Eric will talk a little bit more about some of those other multifaceted benefits. So our plantings are very openly spaced, meaning the tree planting pods, and when I say pod, it's a mulched area like over on the right, not only includes a tree or two tightly spaced, but a series of defensible shrubs, all of which shrubs and trees are either native to this area or indigenous to the Northwest, so that after they're established, the idea is after the third year of establishment, really after the second year, they're on their way. They might need one structural pruning, but we're not going to go out there and be fussy. We want these to be workhorses to control air quality and other things that Eric will talk about. So the plantings are spaced 45 feet or better apart so that the big mower crews can come in there. There's good adequate sight lines as the trees and shrubs develops for adjacent property owners. We're not trying to create a thick, dense forest necessarily, more of an open, dare say, savanna-like landscape. Next slide, please. So since 2014, we've done 9 events. Some sites we've come back to on a second phase. We typically plant anywhere from 15 to 25 pods. The slide there on the lower left is close to here at Highway 126 and 52nd along, that's the northeast quadrant of that interchange, or intersection, I should say. So we're well off the highway. Folks have fun, but really, as Eric said, it's a long-term investment that initially takes a little bit of effort, not much money really in the scheme of things. And we're not the first to come up with this idea. One person that came to my mind was Lady Bird Johnson in the 1960s. She advocated for a number of things: beautification of the highway system, the interstate highway system, which was quite new at the time, but also speaking to our regional trees and shrubs and flowers. And I think we owe it to ourselves here in Oregon to do the same. We sort of, our local folks, we take it for granted, but traveling, it's really nice. Some of these areas can be much more than what they currently are. They can serve other needs. And I think I'll kind of wrap it back to Eric.
Okay. Next slide, please. So I'm sure you guys know most of the benefits trees provide, so many different benefits. I'm just going to talk about a couple that are particularly important and that we focused on as part of these projects.
Happy people.
And happy people, that's actually the most important thing that Friends of Trees works on, is engaging volunteers so that they have fun at the events, that are more likely to volunteer in the past, and have something that they can come back to and say, it's actually one of our logos, hey, I planted that. That site there, I believe, was funded. We had some funding from LTD, and that's at the entrance to Eugene on Highway 99. There's just a little small area there where we had 5 pods, and a lot of fun doing that. Obviously, trees clean air and water. We've kind of focused on some of the pollinator benefits for that the native shrubs that we plant provide, and particularly most of them are in the rose family, really good for pollinators, things like our native spirea and other plants. Trees reduce stormwater pulses, and they make a lasting difference in our communities. Next one, please, Ellen. And so getting at some of the community benefits, volunteer engagement is the most important thing that we do, we think. 4,000 volunteers helped out on the over the 7 years so far of the I-205 project in Portland. 540 volunteers so far in the Eugene Springfield events, and we forgot to count the maintenance projects that we do, where we once or twice a year we come back with volunteers and weed and mulch the projects to get rid of blackberries and things like that by hand. And so companies like Best Buy and Starbucks have been coming out with us and helping out on these projects. In part of the I-205 project, one of the impetuses for that was that there are these underserved areas east of I-205 that have low income, high diversity, super high asthma rates. And there's been a lot of research from PSU researchers where they found that brake pad dust is at high concentrations along I-205. And they've studied trees and found that they absorb particulates particularly well, take them out of the air, and they do an exceptional job at removing brake pad dust from areas. So may be very good at reducing asthma rates. There's a lot of research on other benefits about trees that many people don't know about, such as reducing glare and noise, actually making roadways last longer, lowering medical costs, lowering blood pressure, slowing driving speeds, and on and on. Next slide, please. This slide I'm really, really proud of. It's something that Friends of Trees really tries to bring as many people together at our events as we can, and it's a great group of people, great group of organizations up there. And I wanted to mention that how we got started on this project was in 2010. Jeff and I got grants from the Home Depot Foundation and Alliance for Community Trees to plant trees in Train Song neighborhood in Eugene, the lowest income neighborhood in Eugene, highest diversity area, and one of the most polluted areas in Eugene. At the time, big issues of the solvent bubbling up from the Union Pacific rail yard and under people's houses. And we were able to get Union Pacific for the first time ever to give us a beautification lease of 10 feet wide and a 1,200 feet long strip where we planted trees adjoining the neighborhood there. A lot of people told us it was so polluted all the trees would die. Almost every tree has survived there and is doing well now 5 years later. Next slide. So we have not received any funding from ODOT for these projects yet. We've primarily funded our local work from grants and business sponsorships. The Union Pacific Foundation is funding our work along Northwest Expressway on Lane County land. The Alice Tyler Trust has provided a significant amount of money, along with a couple other foundations, REI included. We've gotten business sponsorships where we can for events. Mountain Rose Herbs has been our biggest supporter so far. We've also are partnering with Daimler Trucks North America, which funds the, if you go to a Duck game and see them score touchdowns, you may see on the Jumbotron that they plant trees with Friends of Trees for one tree for every point they score. The Trailblazers, same thing, they plant 3 trees for every tree planted. So the vision for the future is to find a way to fund this so we can continue to do work and expand what we're doing. Our executive director, Scott Fogarty, in our Portland chapter has worked with electeds, state electeds, as part of a vision to take this statewide. State Senator Chip Shields and others sponsored Senate Bill 721 in 2015, the Livable Roadway Bill. That did not move forward. ODOT Director Garrett at the time did not think money was there to make that happen. We're still working on that as a possibility. If trees can be designated as capital assets, then it's possible to attach dollars to capital projects for landscaping. And we want to see if we can seek out state and federal funding to do these projects also. I really want to point out that these projects benefit all the organizations represented in this room and benefit our community as a whole. But we have not received any funding from any of the organizations here yet, and except for LTD on one project. Thank you. And we really want to find a way to have local funding for these projects so that we can make this a sustainable program that goes on into the future. So we're looking for opportunities to do that. Next year's proposed projects are another planting along Northwest Expressway, along with several maintenance projects to take care of the projects that we've already planted there. This would be there's our third or fourth project along Northwest Expressway. And many of you guys may have seen the homeless camp that's there at the beginning. That's a project we planted those trees that they're living within about early 2000s. So that was a project with City of Eugene Neighborhoods program that we did years ago. Bob Straub Parkway Phase 2 in Springfield, and I-105 Rose Garden Phase 3. So you can see there the embankment of I-105 right where it starts is where we are hoping to plant again this season. So thank you very much, and if you have questions, Oh, final slide, please. If you have any, that was a Valentine's, shortly after Valentine's Day planting, the slide in the middle, and one of our volunteers really went for it by laying out the shovels for the volunteers. That is Kevin Finch and his son, ODOT maintenance guy that's worked with us on the projects down the bottom left, and the events are really, really fun and a blast. So let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
All right, so any questions? Yes, Alan.
Great program. My question goes beyond what you guys do with ODOT. You work with local communities too, right?
Yes.
On a regular basis. This is in Eugene. You guys are from Eugene, so we had a little ice storm a little while ago, and they chopped down an enormous amount of trees. I'm wondering if you know who's responsible for the stump removal and replanting of trees.
Great question. Have been in 2 meetings so far, and going to a meeting next Tuesday with City of Eugene about them investing money in replanting street trees and removing stumps as part of that project. They told me they currently believe they have at least 3,200 stumps in their planting strips in the City of Eugene, of which at least 600 are from the storm, probably more. Wow. And they are setting aside some money. I mean, it would take, if you figure $150 for each of those and do the math, it's a lot of money, which is probably low for removing the stumps. So we're meeting with them about next year making it. We have a small contract with them to plant 375 trees with volunteers every year, and they want to boost that number next year using their volunteer program, contractors and Friends of Trees, and incorporate stump removal into that.
And boosted to how many?
They would like to plant 500 additional trees next year. However, the amount of money for that it makes it tough, so we'll see.
And we do work within the city of Springfield, not just ODOT right away. We have a small little contract with City of Springfield Public Works, and we're trying to expand that. We are kind of always thought of as Eugene only, but that's not the case. We're Eugene Springfield Metro. So I want to emphasize that. We're not just staying on the west side of the river. All the communities, Springfield has a lot of work out there, just like Eugene does. Springfield's blessed with some very healthy soils in general that makes tree planting a little bit easier in some ways, but we do work in Springfield as well as Eugene.
Good question, thanks.
Yes.
Is there, excuse me, like an average cost for planting a tree? Do you have any idea what that would be?
It depends on the kind of tree and where. Like in this program that we're describing, we're planting small, primarily native trees like those two little Valley ponderosa pines there. Gosh, I'm not sure about the numbers for these. For planting a tree in the public right-of-way as a street tree, we're more expensive than a contractor that just puts a stick in the ground and walks away, because we follow up after the planting with support for the homeowner on watering and mulching and weeding the tree. We visit every tree twice for the first 2 dry seasons after the tree and all that. Our estimated cost is about $250 a tree per tree to plant and do the community engagement and the support piece. If the homeowner's doing the watering cost, so when we plant in high rental areas like what we call the ground zero area around the U of O campus, where there's a lot of tree vandalism and such, we're unable to get a treecipient or a homeowner to water the tree. We do the watering ourselves, and it costs about $200 a tree to water for 3 summers. So those are much more expensive.
But in another neighborhood beyond ground zero, the homeowner would, $35 is our fee for a street tree. But our value, what Eric is closer to $250, and we have to pool that money together. We have lots of other cool little acronyms and stuff besides treecipients.
I like that.
Yeah,
That's good.
Treesentments, triage. We could go on.
Thank you.
So I believe you did the project that's in front of the 32nd Street Lamb Lane sports complex, and I remember it because I'm always looking for short trees.
Yep.
And you did specifically short trees because they're under power lines. And that's just such a blessing to have, oh, I can just drive by there and get out because there's little stickers in the ground to tell me, and I can see the tree that I might want. So I thought that was very innovative and a great project. I remember being there for that and having kids participate.
And I want to share that was a Team Springfield project that we just helped with a little bit of the volunteer organization with. And so City of Springfield, Willamette Lane, and school district, I believe, also were involved in that. And I just met with Willamette Lane, and they're putting in some better plaques that will identify the trees there.
Yeah, that's just a community asset to be able to understand, because many of us have power lines somewhere near us.
Yep.
And trees that are appropriate.
Yep, and for us to field calls, and, our online store is pretty sophisticated with pictures and descriptions of the options that are offered, but to be able to point a homeowner or a customer or a citizen to what they call a linear arboretum under wire there. We have another one out in West Eugene, all the better, because they can see that tree for real throughout different times of the year.
Yes, great, thank you. Yes, Randy?
Yeah, I wanted to say that, when they approached me at a safety event, it was about, can we plant trees in Region 2? It wasn't an easy lift, I'll have to tell you, because our Office of Maintenance, trees, and, their leaves, they block out things, they get in the way of mowers. We could cut down trees, but we don't want to plant them. So, but these guys work so well with our Office of Maintenance, and they picked trees that would work for everybody and the planting scheme so that mowers can get in and around them. And if they could pass muster with those folks, they can do anything. So I just applaud their efforts, and the region manager's been on board. I'm sorry that we haven't been able to provide funding yet, but I'm hopeful that we will in the future. And I just encourage your agencies to partner with them because they do fabulous work.
Yeah, I agree. Very good. Other questions on this? Okay. Well, we sure appreciate the work you do, obviously, and
Would you like us to leave? We brought some bling and various things there. And
yes, we love bling.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there is. So we'll leave that there until the meeting concludes, and then we'll come back for it.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
So, okay, so today we have quite a few public hearings, so we're going to try and keep things moving because I know I thought that I had forgotten I ordered something that would come FedEx, and I was all excited, and then I opened the package and went, oh. It's okay.
This came out, yes.
But so, on to 6A.
Now that I know you met the safety plan with excitement.
Okay.
So you do have the draft safety plan in front of you for adoption. TPC has recommended that we adopt it, and it does have a few changes from the last version that you saw in the January packet that actually ended up being the February packet. We have the new vision statement that you so thoughtfully workshopped last month. So that's in the new draft. The goals have not changed. There is one additional strategy that was recommended by staff to do some coordination with emergency services. So that's one change. And then the performance measures have not changed. We talked about last month that there will be an opportunity for us to set safety targets. And we do not have those safety targets in the plan at this point, but they will be part of the next iteration that will be in our next regional transportation plan. So that will be us actually talking about the dates when we're going to accomplish our goals. We talked a lot about that while we were writing our vision. We don't have targets set. We do have a towards vision language in our vision statement, and those targets will come at a later date.
So are you looking for any questions or comments?
Yeah, if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. So, and we've seen this document before. Yes.
Yes. Not in this exact form, but yes.
Yes, before. Yes, Gary.
I'm just wondering, how difficult would it be to do a press release in response to Mr. Zako's comment? Because I gotta admit that I think this is pretty exciting, and it's pretty important. And unfortunately, I watch the TV and I see all these events occurring on roads and whatnot. And I think that has some merit, I think.
Yeah, I don't think it would be difficult for us to do it for the plan. We do have the intent to do that with our Safe Communities program, which is a little bit more of a outward community involvement type program. Not that we don't want the public to read our plan, it's just at a different level than they may be interested in. So, part of the problem with press releases is you have to have somebody pick it up. And so we're hopeful that with some of the work that we're doing with Safe Communities, when we're doing DUI education outreach or working with Lane County Public Health, that there might be some interest in some of the work that we're doing when we're going out and doing communication or classes around bike and pedestrian safety. But I don't think it would be difficult to do one if there was interest.
I just think it's a good opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute, Alan. That's it.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I was interested in the performance measures or targets. Are you considering them performance measurements or?
Yeah, so we do have them right now, and we're tracking them on our data portal right now. We started that through this planning process, and we will continue to do that on a yearly basis as the ODOT data is released. But the part that we don't have in the performance measures is the targets that says we're going to reach this number of. Yeah, so that part will come. It's part of the requirement for performance-based planning that FHWA is rolling out. We are within the timeline where we don't have to set those targets, but for our next regional transportation plan, we will have to have those targets.
Which is by when?
Well, I think the rule will be official in August, but it will be in our next, not this RTP that you're looking at this month, but the next 4-year RTP.
Oh, so really, we won't adopt performance measurements until then? 4 years?
We may not do it all at once. We may do the safety planning targets before that.
Yeah, I was hoping that you would.
Yeah.
That I think that's kind of a standalone thing that could come back to us or integrate into the safety plan as soon as you can get them done.
Yeah.
Would be my choice.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why we couldn't do them earlier. I think I mentioned last month that this plan will be part of the regional transportation plan, although we're adopting it as its own plan right now. All the future updates will be part of that new regional transportation plan. So we could do it within that time frame.
So,
we could do it as early as next fall is
Okay.
probably the earliest we could do it when we have direction.
Yeah, I'm good with approving this if that's the case, that we're going to adopt performance measurements by next fall. That would be great. That means fall 2017.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
If I may do that, the issue with that is that the federal rulemaking on what's required of us for performance measures in many areas has been delayed and is not done yet. In fact, they just pushed back one of the deadlines to May when we thought it was going to be done last month. So we really can't move forward until the federal rulemaking is done. And then under the federal rulemaking, it's required that the state and the transit districts establish their performance measures and targets first. The MPOs then have 6 months to establish it after the state and the transit districts are done. So we actually have to wait in line. There is a deadline for us.
Really 2018.
It's probably like 2018.
Yeah.
Although ODOT has set their targets, but they'll revise them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So again, I can't promise a date yet just because there's several things to do.
Where's LTD in their process? Yeah, adopting performance measures for safety.
For safe, we have safety performance measures already adopted that we work regularly at. What we haven't been doing, which is now the new, is how to communicate them and share them and work together collaboratively. So I think that's going to be our next step, because that's some of the portions of the plan that we really had not coordinated.
You guys have that coordinated, and then we can get this done earlier?
Sure.
Maybe even 2017.
Sid?
So I'd like to just follow up with Gary's comments, and appreciate Rob actually coming forth and talking about a press release. I'm actually strongly in favor of that. I think we should. And not only that, I think the press release needs to go to Senator Beyer, Representative McEwen, Representative Lively, all members of the Joint Committee. It also needs to go to Congressman DeFazio and Senator Wyden, who will both have a piece when it comes to transportation. Lane County, 2 years in a row, has led every county in the state of Oregon in fatalities, and I think it needs to be addressed. And the reason why I bring that up, because without money, this is nothing more than just a nice, pleasant document. And while I appreciate having the performance measures in place, the document is very good, so to staff, I want to say thank you very much. But without this, the green, the dollars, it's going to be a nice document, and that's unacceptable. And I think that we need to work very closely with while the transportation package is being talked about, we need to make sure they understand that safety is a top priority. Clackamas County is second, and by the way, they're pushing this hard too. And when it comes to fatalities, we're number 1 and 2 and have been in the last 2 years. And I've talked to my colleagues from Clackamas County Board of Commissioners. They're absolutely pushing the safety piece and pushing the dollar piece as well. And they'll be reaching out to Congressman Schrader. But I think that and I also think I think it would be important, not just a press release, but I think the leadership here, I think especially the 2 mayors, and I think anybody here on this board, LTD, Pat, myself, whomever, need to actually have a press conference, more than just a press release, announcing the importance of this and talking about the fact that we find Lane County being top out of every county in the state in fatalities, completely unacceptable, and we're trying to do something about it. And put pressure on our delegation. We need to. Otherwise, this is nothing more than just a neat document. And let's get beyond a neat, good document. And actually, with staff putting this together, then you can feel proud of it too, saying, look what we were able to put together for you as elected leaders and leaders in this community to actually move forward and accomplish something. So those are my thoughts on that. And I think it's absolutely important that we do so.
Yeah.
Thanks. And just to tag along with Sid, I'd echo what he says, but in Lane County has the highest number of fatalities. ODOT, you guys have done your part in trying to improve the roadways, 126 to Florence, for instance. Much easier, much safer drive than it ever has been. Still isn't there. But on rural roads, on county roads, is where we have issues. And the significant biggest issue is we don't have 6 cops patrolling 12 blocks. We have 1 cop patrolling Connecticut, the size of Connecticut. So, so that's the issue. You can drive with impunity on county roads because you know the state police aren't going to be there because they're busy on 126 and 58. The county cops aren't going to be there because if they're in Oak Ridge today, they're sure as heck not in Dalton. So, that's, as we move forward with the county, it's significant that we keep our eye on that ball, and not just infrastructure, but the public safety element of patrol, and making certain that people have a reason to obey the speed limits and obey the traffic devices. So, I didn't say anything different to say. Just kind of embellish a little bit with the fact that something that if Byron Trapp was sitting here right now, he would want me to say that.
So, can you remind me when Lane County's plan is going to be adopted?
Well, the vision is in place. David's here right now. This is concurrent. I mean, there's nothing that doesn't match up with what you guys have written here, David.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a work session with the board coming up next week, and then we will be moving forward with the adoption after that. So it'll probably be into early summer, but very, very close.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be a good opportunity to do maybe a joint press conference when both of the plans have been adopted.
So I'm looking to you to help us coordinate with our PIO staffs or whomever it is that makes the most sense to put together a news conference.
Okay.
Can try and get as many of us in the same location at the same time, but I'm sure we'll all make the most effort to be able to publicize this as best as possible.
Great, thank you.
And as close to May 16th as... No.
Nice try, Pat. Okay. Okay.
17?
Yes, Gary.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo, I think it's a really positive statement to juxtapose where we are versus where we want to be. Now, if I were running for office as a county commissioner, that's probably going to come up against seated county commissioners now, that we're not very safe and we don't have enough police service. So it's better, I think, to admit that up front and say we have a plan to work on it and where we're going with it. And I don't know, it would be interesting to see what the data is. I'd have to talk to our PR folks. How many times LTD puts out a press release related to something positive versus commenting on an accident? And any effort to make that more positive, I think, is a real plus. And outside of annexing Junction City to Lynn County, I don't know what more positive effort there could be made to promote traffic safety.
Okay.
That's not in the plan, by the way.
And I have close personal friends in Junction City. At least former ones.
Okay, so with that, are there any other questions or comments, but you're happy to help us with getting something together in a good time frame and the right messages? Okay, great. Anything else? So we need to we have to have a motion for this. So I'm looking for a motion for the safety plan.
Move approval.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, thank you. Yes, good job. Okay, next we have City of Coburg request. And Dan is here for that report.
So this is a proposed amendment to the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program to add $95,000 of discretionary surface transportation block grant funds to the Coburg Loop Path project. This project was originally supported by MPC in 2013, scheduled for construction this year. An unexpectedly high construction bid has resulted in this need for $95,000 extra dollars. CPC has unanimously supported this. It would be an expedited request to give Coburg the best chance of meeting their 2017 construction date and not having to push this back another year. Those of you who have the map that was handed out, aside from the packet, this is segment 2 of what is on that map that we're talking about.
Looks like this.
That's right. Happy to answer.
It was placed at your seats before the meeting. It's not part of that big packet that came in the box in the mail.
Yeah, this one.
That's right.
On the bottom of the pump.
Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on this? No, just smiles over here. Yes, Sid.
No question, just like to move approval.
I have, this is a public hearing though.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay, so.
I'm too fast.
Hang on, 1 second. So, let me go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to speak to this topic?
There's no one signed up this time.
Okay, no one signed up, so I can close the public hearing. Okay,
Move approval.
okay. Second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Good job. Congratulations, Coburg. Okay, next item is our Unified Work Planning Program. Paul?
Oh, boy. Good afternoon. I think I'll join you for a while. So the next item is the draft of the MPO's Unified Planning Work Program. The UPWP is required of every MPO in the country to demonstrate the transportation planning not only by the MPO, but by the member and partner jurisdictions that do transportation planning within the MPO, and to indicate where the federal funding will be directed to do that planning. We are one of the only MPOs in the country that adopts a 2-year UPWP so that it gives a little bit longer time frame to the work program. And so this is a new 2-year UPWP as opposed to a mid-year addendum, which we do. The UPWP in your packet has been reviewed by both the Oregon Department of Transportation, the Federal Highways Administration, and the Federal Transit Administration in a half-day on-site meeting with us. And frankly, it was very well received, highly supported by both ODOT and US DOT. What we have today is a request for the public hearing and any feedback you may have on it, and it will be scheduled for adoption next month in order to get the funding contracts in place for all of the jurisdictions by July 1st. Happy to answer any questions.
Any other questions about? So the only comment, I have a comment about it, and it's under the point-to-point, which is on page 72. And I'm looking at the work program, the program enhancements, and I know that we're wanting to do some specific work in Springfield, so I just want to point out that as we go into the work program for the year, that we have an option to talk about specific work that might be things that we consider real important. The point-to-point would be really great to be a partner in terms of that work and want to know that. So the question, I guess, is there's opportunities to take a look at specific work that we could do within the point-to-point work plan, that this isn't going to lock us into anything.
I should mention that both in the actual work tasks and in what's called the financial plan in here, there's a tremendous amount of flexibility.
Okay.
This is the aspirational work program. As we all know, things come up. When we wrote this 2 years ago for the current biennium, there was no idea that we'd be spending so much time on CMAQ. So if you look back, you won't even see it referenced, but of course we spent a lot of time doing that. So yes, this does not lock us in.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I know I'm specifically talking about the gateway areas, so looking at, how we can use the point-to-point, which is the best sort of group to help work with us on that. Okay, that was my only question on it. Are there other questions? Yes, Ellen.
Paul, maybe you can help me clarify how the UPWP relates to the RTP and where they stand and how they'll be updated.
So the draft regional transportation plan, the RTP, that's the next item on your agenda, is the MPO's long-range 20 to 24-year program of projects, if you will, or plan for improvements to the transportation system. When I get to that next item, I'll remind you that the update that's in this packet to the RTP is a very minor, limited scope update. And what we're doing starting next fiscal year, the RTP, the long-range plan, is on a 4-year cycle. It has to be updated at least every 4 years. What we're doing starting next fiscal year with the RTP is opening it up to create a whole new RTP. This RTP has been in place essentially the same framework since 2001, and we've updated it every 4 years since then. We have committed to a major new RTP. There's lots of ideas that staff have been talking about. There are lots of things that have changed just in the past couple of years, much less the last 15 or so years. Greenhouse gas emissions, climate change, certainly the CMAQ funding, safety becoming much more of a focus, things like that, that we are starting to refer to in the UPWP as it sets the work program for the next 2 years. But again, it's not locking us in, and one of the things we will do with the next RTP is really starting in July and into summer, early fall, throwing out the ideas for what is the new RTP framework, what are the policy things we should be examining, what are the issues that need to be addressed as a region in that new long-range plan. So I hope that's...
So when we do that major overhaul of the RTP, and the time frame for that is 2 years?
Well, again, it has to be done every 4 years at a minimum, so we have up to 4 years, but we can complete it sooner if we wish.
And then, so that will then, we would modify the UPWP accordingly to be consistent with what we do in the RTP.
If necessary, we would amend the UPWP. Again, it's not always necessary to amend the UPWP because of the flexibility. Again, this is a 2-year work program. We will come back to you a year from now and do a mid-year addendum to reflect any changes in the second year of the work program. And yes, that is when we could say, okay, the RTP is 1 year in and we've decided we want to focus on these areas. We could amend that language into the second year of the work program.
This is 2 years and this is 4 years.
Yes.
Okay.
Other comments, questions? Yes, Pat?
Just, thank you, Mayor. Just a question regarding amending. You say quickly, but how quickly do amendments occur, should you need them?
If you need an amendment to the UPWP, it can be done really in essentially a 30-day, but 2-month period. We do need to hold a public comment period, and it is a minimum 30-day public comment period. So it'd be, a proposal like we're doing with the full document now, and then action the following month.
And but during the amendment process, there are all kinds of ways to slow down amendments, I would guess.
Certainly there are.
I look at TSBs, for instance, but we say we're not going to amend the TSB pretty quickly, but there's no such thing.
Unfortunately, we're not talking about the TSP here, and really, again, the UPWP is rarely amended because of the flexibility granted under the work program. It's a guide to what we're going to do, but again, it doesn't constrain us.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's good explanation. Thanks.
Okay, other questions? Okay, so this is also a public hearing, so I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing, and there's
no one signed up.
No one signed up. Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Okay, and this one is, no action on this one.
There is not.
Okay. All right. Next item is our regional transportation plan, and also Paul.
So I just did 95% of my introduction for this one, but I'm happy to talk a few minutes about it. As I mentioned, the draft regional transportation plan in front of you is what we have termed a limited scope, minimal update to the plan. There are a number of things that played out over the past year or two that bumped up against our requirement to update it at least every 4 years. We're actually about 9 months past that deadline. There is a 1-year grace period. And some of those things, as we told you last fall, led us to want to do a minimal update with both ODOT and USDOT's approval to essentially reset our 4-year clock so that we can go into a full examination of the RTP as I just described starting next fiscal year. We provided you the draft of the 4 text chapters, chapters 1 through 4, back at your November meeting. I believe it was November. And so you had a chance several months ago to start reviewing those. This in your packet now contains not only those 4 chapters, but all of the project lists, all of the additional requirements such as the environmental coordination maps and other things in the document. The project lists in Chapter 3 are usually one of the more significant things that people want to look at. It's where we have projects broken out essentially by highway, transit, and by PED. And then if you'll recall, in each of those areas, they're broken out into what we call the financially constrained and the illustrative lists. The idea is that over the 20 to 24-year horizon of the plan, you're supposed to identify everything that is needed to have the system operating, the transportation system operating the way you want it, but then you're supposed to constrain that to the financial reality of what is called reasonably expected revenue. There's a statewide group that helps forecast what those reasonably expected revenues are over 20 plus years. That's not an exact science, so what we do is we then put into the constrained list those things that we think we can reasonably expect to fund, and the illustrative list contains those things that would still be needed but don't currently have reasonably expected funding. So if you, just to take one example, were to look in here At the Beltline improvements between River Road and Coburg Road, there's about half of the future project on the constrained list that we reasonably expect funding for today, and there's about half of it on the illustrative list that we're not sure funding will be available for yet, although there may be breaking news on that soon. So that's all I'm going to say about it. There's a lot that I could talk about. I'm happy to answer questions. Again, this is a relatively minor update, and you saw the 4 text chapters several months ago. We're asking for a public hearing today, and adoption will be scheduled for next month.
Okay. Questions, comments on this?
Yes, question. So on the fiscally constrained list, when it comes to projects on the state system, and there's funding identified, does that mean that that's the amount of match that is going to come from the local agencies toward a state-funded project?
There's no indication of that in these tables.
Because it says 120 million for the Randy Pappy Beltline, and that's probably not quite it. We're looking at probably 200 to 300.
Right. Well, as I mentioned, the current breakdown of that project has approximately 20 million of funded work at Delta Beltline, has the NEPA work funded, and then the full project to complete the improvements is roughly 250 million. The 120 million phase 1 is on the constrained list because we reasonably expect to get that funded, and the other 130 million is on the illustrative list. It's also in the document. So the full 250 million is in here.
So why aren't the matched amounts put into the project list? You know, if you're anticipating and holding back money for a match, how come they're not put on the list?
Well, it's not something that, first of all, is required to identify the funding source at that level of detail in this long-range plan, and second of all, being a 20 to 24-year plan, and the fact that we have to show these in anticipated years of construction, and some of them are out there in 2035, 2037, we really don't know that yet.
Anyway, it would be helpful to know if there's like a stake in the sand. You know, these are the priorities of the local agencies, this is the funding that's attributed to them, so that we're sure that they're prioritized with the act and that we go for them with federal funds.
We tend to have those discussions, if I may, when we get to the MTIP or the actual programming of the funds, which is a 4-year look.
Okay, sounds good.
Yes, Sid.
So Paul, my question is, as we know, coming out of Salem, Rose Quarter, I-205, 217, $500 million, give or take. We're almost getting up to real money. So my question is, given that those are the 3 top priorities in the state, and with federal funding, we're not exactly sure what's going to happen at this point in time. A lot of talk right now, so but which is fine. I mean, that's usually what it takes from the first year or so, is some conversations. But the reality, where are we as far as actual getting in line to see just a shovel picking up one piece of dirt and moving it to say, look, we have a project moving forward here.
On the Beltline project.
Yep. So where are we? Where's the reality? And I know what we're talking about as far as years are concerned. I mean, this is the next out to 2040. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, but given those 3 projects alone, and we're talking about dollars today.
Yes.
Not dollars. So 6-7 years from now, that's probably $600 million. So, your thoughts here?
So, Commissioner, I was going to address that specifically along with the other things under the legislative update. But I can say that it's actually looking encouraging. I had a meeting yesterday with Senator Boquist, and we talked specifically about the Beltline project and the funding for it. And one of the things that he encouraged me to do was to work to get not just the $120 million phase on the committee's list, which it is, but the full $250 million project. And we talked a little bit about potential timing. So I can address more of that under the legislative update agenda item.
No, and that would be great. You don't have to answer that right now, but you said something that's very, very, very important, and I'm glad you did, and that is Senator Boquist. He is the one Republican Democrats are all listening to, and I shouldn't say just he's the only one, but they're really listening to him. And so anybody who has relationships with Senator Boquist would go very, very far in making sure that our projects down here are going to be in the queue.
He is a cheesemaker, by the way.
So, thank you, Pat. You're nominated. No, but I'm just stating that that's very important. I'm glad you brought Senator Boquist up. I've had a couple conversations with him. I don't know him all that well, but you know, he's what he's looking for is that if we're going to actually move forward on making sure that you have something in place, you need to actually get the job done. And that's the kind of guy he is, which I appreciate. I think that's great. And so I just make that comment because I think Senator Boquist is going to be a very key player on this transportation package and helping us. He doesn't even live here. He's not even close to us. And the fact that he's showing interest to me goes a long, long way. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, the other short answer is that the project is in the queue to be in the bill.
Yep. Okay.
Good.
So, one, just because I just thought of it, is whatever happened to all the money for the bridge,
For
the Columbia?
that is a topic they don't even talk about.
Just wondering, that was a lot of money. Was kind of sitting there. Yeah.
They've referred to learning lessons from that other project that we don't talk about, and that's how much they refer to it.
Project that should not be.
All right.
I'm trying to understand the Delta Beltline project and on the Randy Pepe Beltline. So on page 12, chapter 3, has the financial constraint list. That's 120 million, right?
Yes.
And then on the next page, there's 20 million and 28 million.
Yes.
Can you tell me what's in each of those? Are those the only three that refer to that project?
No.
That's not 250.
That's not, and give me a moment here because I don't have the page numbers memorized.
What page?
You don't have this whole chart
Well, this is the illustrative.
That's the constrained list. And those are the projects that we believe on pages 12 and 13 are constrained. I can speak a little bit to those projects, but obviously ODOT might be better suited. And then on the illustrative list, which is the yet to identify certain funding for, is the other 130 million, and that is on page 26. So at the top of page 26 is the other $130 million. Obviously Brenda read this because she knows it faster than I do.
Yeah.
So can you explain what's in each of these four?
So I'll just do a quick overview and then details, but basically right now the $20 million for Delta Beltline is for the improvements that were demonstrated last month at MPC when you had the video and it showed the change to that interchange specifically. That's the $20 million.
That's funded.
The $120 million first phase of the rest of the mainline improvements, if you will, my understanding is that would primarily construct the third bridge, the arterial connector bridge between Green Acres and Division, correct?
Right,
And some other,
and the two, it could also construct the two bridges over the Willamette, make them seismically sound.
Yeah.
That would be a good first phase, to get your river crossings done, right?
Right.
so river crossings is first.
The transit bridge.
So all three bridges.
Yes, all three, yeah.
Three? Oh, because east,
You got
east
the
and
local
west are-
arterial bridges, and then you got the two bridges on.
East, one's east, one's west. There's two bridges there, okay.
And then the final $130 million phase is to finish the
Connect up the interchanges with.
River Road and
With auxiliary lanes and local improvements.
So what's the 28 million on page 13?
That is, no, there's 34 million on
So-
page 13.
No, on
5585.
page 13, the second one down, the 28 million, that's Roosevelt to 11th. And that is a project that's been here a long time.
Yes.
Notice it's 2030 to 2034, so it's a
To the west, yeah.
much further out future year project to continue to expand Beltline from Roosevelt to 11th, where it narrows down from 4 lanes to 2.
lanes, right.
Is to expand it to 4 lanes, all the way to 11th.
We call that the West Eugene Parkway link.
No, that's the other one we don't do.
That's the other way.
Are you telling me how to vote?
And then the last one is the Beltline I-5 interchange that's been funded with JTA money. That's why it says 16 and 19.
But you understand what that 28 million is there? No?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the 34 million is what?
Is the interchange improvements that we're constructing right now?
That's that come off of Coburg Road?
No, that's a completion
And
of
I-5.
I-5 Beltline.
I-5.
I-5 and Beltline.
That's what's, the completion of I-5 Beltline that's happening right now.
Yeah.
Right, that includes the wall and all that.
Oh,
stuff
yes.
going on Coburg Road,
Yeah.
going east.
Exactly.
And all of that intersection and the bridge that's going across.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about the Beltline.
So is that funded?
It's all funded, yeah. It's under
But the 28
construction.
million.
Correct.
And the 120 isn't funded.
Right.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay. I need to do a public hearing for this
Please.
one also. Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing.
Yes, there is one person signed up at this time, Mr. Zager.
Okay.
Chair Lundberg, members of MPC, I'm still Rob Zako, Executive Director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. I'm not usually at a loss for words. I've got nothing for you. I just thought I'd testify because nobody else has signed up. But I want to explain why we have nothing for you and how I communicate to you. So 3 days ago, we got an email with notice of 5 public hearings. If we followed the link to that, we got this. I'm a paid staff person. I'm paid to work for my board of directors, but all my other people are volunteers. We include business leaders, social service leaders, neighborhood leaders, environmental leaders, people of faith, higher education, K through 12, and we work by consensus. So when I come to you and I say something, it's not just me. I've checked with the people that I work for to make sure that we all agree. And sometimes we decide to pass on stuff. So if we're saying something, it's because it's important to us. We can't come to you in 3 days. So I've got nothing on this. It may be that there's really nothing in here. I think a lot of these are sort of administrative or small things. But the public can't turn on a dime, and if you give us 3 days' notice, have 5 public hearings, it's really not realistic that you'll get any input. There may be somebody who testifies in your next 2 public hearings, but you're having 5 public hearings today. Thank you.
Thank you. I think others of us noticed when we got 5.
And I mean, there are practical reasons. I'm not being critical. I'm just sort of saying that we need more time in order to be helpful to you, to provide valuable input. And when we have that, we're happy to do that.
Thank you, and so some clarifications about these aren't brand new. The next RTP is really the one that we need lots of input on, and we'll go through a full process. That this is rather a minor set of issues.
Correct, Chair. And if I may, we will apologize for 5 public hearings today and all 5 of these documents. We had originally anticipated 3 of these being 2 to 3 months ago. There were some delays in getting some final data on some of the project lists and other things from some of the members and you know, getting the information all lined up. And frankly, they just all ended up being on this 1 month, and we are up against the end of the fiscal year deadline to get all of these done by the end of June. So I had hoped to have them split out. There is a 30-day public comment period. It's not just the public hearings today, but they still will have through, I believe, the first Sunday in May to provide public input, and we'll bring that to you at the May meeting.
Yeah, and that's what I saw also, is that there is additional written testimony that can be submitted after today. Okay, so, all right, anyone else? Okay, then I'll close the public hearing, and it's no action on this.
No, it is not.
Okay. All right, next is our MTIP and Paul.
So, while the RTP is the 20 to 24-year long-range plan, the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program is the 4-year programming of the actual funds. The RTP is the anticipatory plan. The MTIP actually puts the money on the ground and says, here's what we're going to build, here's where the money's going for the next 2 to 4 years. This document is a new update or a new MTIP for 18 through 21. It has to coincide with the state, which is also at this time preparing their 18 to 21 state transportation improvement program. The first year, for the most part, FY18 is a carryover from your current MTIP because that runs through 18, and then 19, 20, and 21 are new years in here. So this starts to look at the projects that are going to be funded in those years. For the most part, what is in here is the state funding for projects and some of the federal funding for projects, because not all of the funding for 19, 20, and 21 is determined yet. For instance, the MPO's discretionary money, we have not yet run the process with you to determine what to spend the STBG, now the Service Transportation Block Grant, what you used to know as STP-U, monies on for those out years. We will amend those into this document within the next year at the most. So we brought you the draft MTIP, which again gives you the look, first look at the new years for funding of projects. We will be amending it. This gets amended quite a bit. It will be amended not only with the MPO funding, but you'll notice if you happen to look at the table that summarizes it by year and by jurisdiction after the project lists, you might have noticed, for instance, a drop-off, and I'm referring to this table here, which is on page 25. You might have noticed, for instance, a drop-off after the first year in the Lane Transit District funding. That's because they, like us, don't know exactly what the funding and the projects they will use that funding for are yet in some of the out years. So again, we're asking for a public hearing on this today with adoption scheduled next month.
All right. So are there any questions before I open the public hearing? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone that was scheduled to speak?
No one signed up at this time.
Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. And this is also one that we're not voting today. And looking to Paul, I'm sure that's it. We're just discussing it.
Yes, and again, to reiterate, the text and the language that sets up the projects and the funding in here has not changed from your current MTIP. It's really the project lists, and the project lists in this draft are, I want to reiterate, reflective of this time at the decisions that are being made by other agencies, mainly ODOT and LTD, for the funding that's proposed for those years. We will be coming back to you after you adopt this to make the MPO funding decisions at a later time and amend those into here.
Okay, so next items are air quality conformity. And go right ahead.
Okay. So the last big document in your packet is what's called the air quality conformity determination. In this case, it would be for both the draft RTP and the draft MTIP that you just reviewed. And not to minimize the importance of the air quality conformity determination or the AQCD, but I want to remind you that this, fortunately, is now a much easier determination for us to make. Recall that in 2014, we ended our 20-year maintenance period for one pollutant, and now we're only subject to what's called limited maintenance for PM10, particulate matter 10 microns. And that limited maintenance plan means that we don't have to run the model, we don't have to do the air quality modeling anymore for particulate matter. We only have to review the projects in both the MTIP and the RTP to see if any of those individual projects need hotspot analysis for particulate emissions. So you will notice if you look at the project lists that are repeated in here that there's an air quality status column, and it talks about whether they're exempt or if they need, in this case, the hotspot analysis for PM10. Our particulate matter status is very good. Particulate matter at that level, PM10, is not a major air quality concern. So again, not to minimize this document, it's a federal requirement that we conduct this analysis since we're under limited maintenance for it. but I'm just trying to assure you that it's not an issue as far as our air quality is concerned in this area. Again, we're asking for a public hearing on it, and adoption would be scheduled for next month.
Okay, any questions? Yes.
I just had one quick one, maybe Paul knows the answer. Under the why are we producing this document, it said that home wood heating and industrial sources were the major sources of this particular particulate, whatever it is, that we had.
Yes.
And I understand the home wood heating, but do you have any idea what the industrial sources are that produce that in this area?
Honestly, I would have to go back to the Atlantic Regional Air Protection Agency state implementation plan, which is the state SIP that's referred to in here. That gets to that level of detail. I don't off the top of my head, but we'll certainly get that to you because it does help identify what the industrial sources may be. Now, the monitoring that LRAPA does doesn't necessarily, in every case, monitor every industrial source. They do monitor some individual industrial sources, but they have a better idea and they do that monitoring. I can certainly get that back to you, or I can work on getting that back to you.
So I guess the question is, were they, I know we have restrictions in place that limit the wood heating when the air is stagnant and all that, but were these industrial sources, do you imagine, involved in trying to lower their emissions at that time while we were under this scrutiny?
Yes,
they were.
They are, and they are part of what LRAPA manages. This body only manages the transportation sources of the pollution, and since the transportation sources are not the major contributor to PM10, that's why it's essentially a non-issue for this body. Those industrial and home wood heating sources are LRAPA's responsibility to monitor and to enforce if necessary.
That's okay. You don't need to get any more information back to me. I was just curious. It was just kind of hanging out there for me. Like, okay. Who are those people?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could you just clarify, maybe you did and I'm just not tracking this, what is the difference between exempt and non-exempt in air quality status?
So, again, we are making that determination of exemption or non-exemption with respect to only particulate matter 10 microns, the PM10 that we're under limited maintenance. We're not making that determination with respect to any other emissions under this document. And exempt means that the project is exempt from having to do project level analysis of the PM10 emissions and those emissions impacts on our regional air quality. Non-exempt means that the project will need to do project level, not regional, but project level analysis of the emissions impacts of the project on PM10 air quality in this area.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Helen.
Regarding appendix C, toward the end, good to see carbon monoxide levels falling and ozone levels more or less falling. Can you address those two things and why has carbon monoxide levels just constantly been on a downward trajectory, and same for what's happening with the ozone levels? I know we're teaming for both of those. So.
Correct, and I will do my best. I'm going to start qualifying some of my answers with saying I'm not the air quality expert on staff here, but the simple answer to why the carbon monoxide levels have dropped so steadily is two parts. One, cleaner fuels, two, cleaner vehicles. It's all about technology. The fuels are cleaner going into the vehicles, and the vehicles are cleaner with their emissions. That's the entire story with carbon monoxide.
It's not related to burning stove?
No. Not on the carbon monoxide too. I mean, the significant part, again, is the technological improvements in fuels and vehicles on carbon monoxide. Ozone is actually, although that looks like we have had improving levels at the Lane County level, if you're looking at page C2, you'll also notice that the red line, which is the 8-hour standard, has been lowered. And we have had some concern with ozone that we may have daily violations or worse yet, annual average violations of ozone. Ozone is not entirely, unfortunately, under our control locally because ozone is created by precursors, other emissions, other pollutants that are emitted, and they tend to then have to aggregate in an airshed to create ozone, and a lot of the impact on our ozone is from our local emissions. of those precursors, but a lot of it is also from everybody north of us all the way up to Portland, Vancouver, and the winds bring it down and concentrate it at the southern end of the valley. We have somewhat regular statewide air quality conformity meetings, and we talk about those issues within airsheds and within the state, but ozone is a much more significant topic for all of the MPOs and all the air quality areas in Oregon than PM10 is, or carbon monoxide anymore. Ozone and PM 2.5 are now the pollutants of major concern as far as transportation goes.
North?
Everywhere.
More so than here?
Everywhere.
So how does that work if you have, if it's a separate valley, and you have separate, what, 4 or 5 MPOs in that? How does that work to control that?
Well, that's actually something that we're trying to figure out now in the CMAQ process, how it might work best.
And who gets money for what?
Yes.
Because where it originates from becomes
Right,
a
that's how
topic.
you control it at the source, right?
It's very, very complex. What I will say is that at the last CMAQ statewide policy advisory committee, Mayor Lundberg and Tom and I were at, there was a presentation by Oregon DEQ that went into great detail on all of these transportation-related pollutants. And the bottom line was we're all, as far as the MPOs go, in very similar conditions. Statistically, our differences in our levels of pollution and where we stand with respect to the federal standards is negligible. In other words, we all have the same concerns, we all have the same problems. And so we now need to talk about how to distribute the funding to address them based on some other factors like population or proportionality.
Yeah.
Okay. Similar question, but slightly different on the PM 2.5. On the annual one, on C4, we're not even close to that one, but on the 2.5 on 24-hour, in 2013, we exceeded it.
Yes.
And first question was, why is that, and is that going to occur in the out years? Because the trend line is up.
Yeah.
And does that mean that eventually we're going to be in compliance with PM10 for the 24-hour standard? We were once, and why was that?
We seriously hope that we will not fall into non-compliance in terms of having to be in violation. Being in violation is a term that means we would then be subject to another 20-year non-attainment maintenance program. And we certainly don't want to enter into that status for various reasons, not only because we don't want the pollution to be worse, but we don't want the workload and the constraints associated with that. PM 2.5 has, again, been, like I said, a rising level of concern pollutant for all of the areas throughout the state. We have had some daily exceedances, the 24-hour standard exceedances within the past several years. Fortunately, as those are averaged out over the annual average, which is where the violation is determined, the annual average has not exceeded the standard, and that's where the violations occurs on the annual average.
There's no daily violation standard?
It's not a daily violation standard,
It's the average year. So the C4, HC4 graph is really what rules.
That's where really the one to look at in terms of are we at risk under the federal standards.
Yeah, because I would suspect there's significant health impacts for PM 2.5 that we would want to avoid.
Yes.
But we're not even close at this point.
Right.
All right, good, thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
Good luck on those.
Sid.
So Paul, question I have, and this just reminded of just recently what happened. So the president just recently rolled back Obama-era fuel economy standards. How is that going to affect the potential here? And also, just reading again, the expectation is gas prices are going to remain low for at least another good solid year, if not longer. How does this affect potentially where we are today in trying to maintain this? Or do you know yet? And if you need to do an analysis on that, I'm not asking you to speculate, but if you need to come back to us a later date, maybe with a little bit more information, that's fine too. I'm just asking this now, or if you have an answer, that's great. But if not, I'm not asking for one if you don't have what I would call a strong analysis right now.
neither one is a good influence. Neither one of the two changes you mentioned is a good influence on air quality for us in terms of certainly if you have lower vehicle miles than were originally projected to be miles per gallon standards, you're probably going to have more fuel burning, therefore you're going to have more emissions. Yet I haven't seen the analysis of how that may actually impact because those rule changes are so new. There is one of those statewide air quality conformity meetings happening later this month, and that's on the agenda to start talking about the impacts of some of these regulatory changes that have just happened. So I can get back to you on that.
But we've had lower gas prices though for, it's at least a couple years now. And so that's a trend. So I guess what I'm just asking is if, I think that's something which we just continue need to monitor. And so that's why I'm just throwing it out there just to make sure that we stay on top of that. Very good, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, all right, so this is also a public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone signed up?
There was none.
None. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. And this one also is one that we're not voting on. And a question, these all have 30-day written comment periods that are available.
Correct.
Until April 30th. Right around there. Okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay. All right. And we've already seen Friends of Trees. So we have follow-ups and next steps. First is legislative update.
I'm sorry if I may.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I put legislative update first on follow-ups because we actually have a fair amount to talk about there, and it might take up most of the rest of the time. There were a number of handouts at your place that I'm going to refer to as I go. I'm going to start with a summary of some of the individual bills, just real quick touch on 4 or 5 of them, and then I'm going to get to the discussion about the transportation package. First, Senate Bill 5540 is the ODOT budget bill. I wanted to mention that because so far that bill is proceeding as you might expect it would, but the public hearings on that bill have generally focused, the public testimony has generally focused on 3 areas within the ODOT budget. One is support for the DMV improvements, which is mainly IT improvements and DMV modernization so that DMV can be more efficient and can also be self-sufficient in its budget. Number 2, public testimony in large part from AGC contractors and other people associated with the industry have focused their testimony on wanting to improve ODOT's project selection management delivery processes, streamlining that and trying to make it more efficient. And then number 3, the other major area of testimony I've heard on the ODOT budget has been around the $8.6 million in that bill to continue the Amtrak passenger service between Eugene and Portland. All the testimony has been positive, but it is an area that continues to need support because, if you recall, it almost failed last time, and that's where that continued funding is placed this time is within the ODOT budget. It's something that MPC has already indicated support for, and if you wanted to today to actually indicate, we could provide testimony on your behalf on that.
Go ahead.
If I could, Madam Mayor, I think we need to, and here's the reason why, and because we heard from Venn that we can't accommodate everybody coming in here in 2021. They're going to be coming from Portland. And in fact, if there's a way that we can strongly support this with from the passenger standpoint of Portland coming down to Eugene via train, would be fantastic for the 2021 World Truck and Field Games. And when I was back in D.C., had a really good conversation with Amtrak's government affairs individual person. And we talked about that. The nice thing is, Congressman DeFazio is already on this from a federal standpoint, but I think from a state standpoint, it would make a lot of sense to support, really based on if nothing else, based on this one event, because I think after this one event, I think there's a real opportunity beyond that. Mm-hmm. And so I think that this is really, I don't mean to interrupt you, Paul, but you brought that up, and I think we have a really good opportunity here to be strongly supportive of that from our standpoint. And I mean, talk to as many people as you can in Salem and say, this is what's important for not only us, but statewide.
And again, I appreciate that, Commissioner, and I wanted to specifically ask, Brendan, and I wanted to ask if you specifically wanted us to draft testimony to have the chair sign that we would then submit to OLS as testimony from the MPO.
I mean, yes.
I'd say yes.
And Hillary and Gary and Alan all want to comment on trains.
Okay. Well, I wanted to say that Mayor Piercy has retired, and as you know, she was well-placed in many transportation committees, well-known, had a lot of experience, was pushing for our passenger services, and that's a loss in the for us to contact legislators, because she had a lot of information. And so I really feel we need to pick up, some of that slack that she was carrying forward.
Alan? Or Gary? Who was first?
Go ahead, Alan.
Oh, I was going to say, yes, we definitely need to put in testimony on that. I had 3 reasons for doing it. One was the 2021 games and people getting here from Portland. The other one is that rail is an integral part of reducing greenhouse gases. And the third one is just a business economic development standpoint, having connection to Portland and Salem and Albany is really critically important. I know I often take the train up to meetings in Portland that originates here and ends up in Portland. I can get back in a day. Without this funding, those trips don't occur. Yeah. And so from a business standpoint, it really facilitates be able to do business in Portland from Eugene and vice versa.
Gary?
And also in favor. Obviously, I've served on that committee with Mayor Piercy. Paul, is the $6 million a decrease?
8.6 million for the biennium.
8.6, because it wasn't the original ask 10?
It would, the amount in the bill would continue the existing level of service.
Okay. Okay, so there won't be any more cuts?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
8.7.
Might be 7, I'm sorry.
So I'm thinking, though, that particularly for the games, that's not a lot of trips.
And this is only for the next biennium, which would be 18 and 19, so
Yeah.
it's not funding for the game service yet.
But if you lose it, hard to get
Good luck.
And I understand, but
That's the issue.
if I were writing the letter, I would write it with the idea that by the time we get to 2021, we truly need better service. And then I would add that we would like to keep that service afterwards, because I agree, if we're going to impact travel, and I spend enough time going up to Portland now that I hate that trip. It would be very nice to have frequent train service up to Portland all the time. So building it up to 2021 and then being able to maintain it. If everybody's amenable to trying to draft a letter that would emphasize those two.
Including when it starts after the sun comes up.
About 2 months of the year, it's light at 5:30. That used to be my main transportation north, was at 5:30, the dark 30 train.
So was there another hand up over here? Yes.
Well, I was just saying, if we're looking at $250 million for 205 and not so much, obviously, 217, but if you're taking cars off of 205 to get them from Eugene to Portland, $8.6 million is a nice change of plan from $250 million as a first ask.
No, they very much understand that.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So I'll look to you all to draft a letter that we could put together, and everybody's in agreement that for me to sign that. Okay.
Sound right.
Does that include you going up there and testifying?
Yeah. Sure. Sure. No, I don't mind doing that.
The next bill I thought I trained.
I'll take the train, that's right. And tell them how we need better service.
You get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get here.
Okay.
I have 4 more bills I'm just going to really quickly mention and then get to the big one. Senate Bill 1020, which is LTD's matching funds, if you will, that's my phrase, $30 million of state funds to hopefully match future federal funding for the next BRT line, has been referred to Ways and Means with a due pass recommendation, so it is moving forward positively. And Senate Bill 1008, which we touched on last month, which is the clean diesel bill, originally had a CMAQ provision in it that would have reduced CMAQ funding by 25% directed at clean diesel. We understand that CMAQ provision will not move forward, so that's good news. House Bill 2667 is the Vision Zero task force, statewide task force. At this point, there's been no hearing and no work session scheduled, so it may not move forward. The deadline is coming up very soon. Yes, and the Safe Route to School statewide funding, House Bill 3230, has also not had any hearing or work session scheduled yet, so unfortunately that statewide effort may not move forward. Moving on from those, I wanted to get to the transportation package. So, building on what I updated you on last month, there's been a lot of development and a couple things that we need to talk about in depth. As has already been mentioned, the focus of the package very much started as a focus on the Portland area congestion relief projects. And I put a map there just to illustrate what I told you last month are those projects, to give you an idea of them visually. I won't go any further on that. Also at your place is this table, which is the working group on congestion and highway mobility or freight mobility. Concept or course of action number 3. This is not by any means the final package for funding improvements on the state highway system, but it gives you an idea of what they're looking at in terms of timing the Portland area projects. And then you can see a few other things on here, and I want to call attention to 2 of them. One is at the very left, down near the bottom, it says MPO Eugene VMT Origo Pilot Expansion. So, this is the Origo VMT pay per mile program that started as the Road User Fee Task Force for Rough Tough many years ago. Originally, the very first pilot project for Rough Tough was supposed to happen here in this area. And they wanted to do it at the dealer level, and they couldn't get a gasoline dealer in this area to sign up. And when they found a gasoline dealer in the Portland area, they moved the pilot project up there. And there have been now several pilot projects that have been focused in the Portland metro area, and the statewide pilot project that's been going on now. They want to do the next phase of a pilot project, and they would like to do it in our metropolitan area. They'd like to focus it here. So they actually have proposed funding that in this package. So there's lots of details to be determined, but just a heads up that may be happening as part of this package. The second thing then is moving all the way out to the right of the table. You'll see in what's called year 10 to 15, a list of projects, and under there is that first $120 million phase of Beltline that I talked about a few minutes ago. It's not scheduled for years 10 to 15. That's just a placeholder out there in the far right of the column. Notice the TBD, which is the to be determined. That is really the time frame is to be determined. An earlier version of this had that project actually in year 3 or 4 for funding, and we have every expectation that we'll be able to move it back up to an earlier funding position on this table when the package is put together to build it. Again, I had a meeting with Senator Boquist yesterday, and he indicated 2 things. Number 1, that yes, it can be funded sooner if we have a partnership for funding, and I'll get to that in a minute. And that number 2, he strongly encouraged us to put the whole $250 million needed on the table now, and then we might have to phase the 120 in years 3 or 4, and the other 130 in years 9, 10, or beyond. But get it all into this, and so we'll be trying to accomplish that. I put 2 other things at your table. One is the possible revenue options. This is just an update, but even that changed a little bit last night. I talked through most of these last month and gave you the dollars, so I'm not going to do that now. But they've narrowed the list a little bit, so these are still the ones that are on the table. That's why it says elimination process, because they did eliminate a few. The fifth bullet down, new vehicle excise tax is now at 2%. We were talking about a 2% tax on the sales of new vehicles in the state, so you might change that. That came out last night. Otherwise, if there's any questions on any of those new revenue or increased revenue sources, I'd be happy to talk to them. But otherwise, I'll keep moving on.
Are these in any order?
No. And they're not in any order, and not only not in any priority order, but some of them would only apply to certain types of uses. For instance, the top 5 are generally highway revenue sources, and then you get into a bicycle revenue source and a transit revenue source, and then the pre-construction tolling or congestion pricing are highway focused. And then the last 2 bullets there just apply to how any of the ones above could be implemented. Tiering refers to taking something like the title fee, which is the third one, which is right now a flat fee for all types of vehicles, and you notice that it says change title fee to 3 tiers, and they're talking about charging higher levels of title fees for higher value vehicles. In other words, trying to make it a little more progressive of a fee. And then the last one, stair-stepping, is about how to roll some of these out. For instance, fuel tax is the most obvious example, where just for example, we're going to do an 11-cent statewide fuel tax increase. Do you do it all in year 1, or do you stair-step it and implement it as a 2-2-2-3? Actually, no, 2-2-2-2-3 gets to 11, which is what they're thinking they might do. Implement it over time. Part of the reason for stair-stepping something like the fuel tax is that you don't need all the money up front. You're building these expensive projects over a 10-year frame, so if you do 2 cents here, 2 cents here, 2 cents here, 2 cents here, and 3 cents here, the revenue comes in as you need it.
Yes, Alan.
What is the bicycle cost share? Is that the
Excise
having
tax?
excise
Is
at the point of sale, so it's having bicycles help pay for the roads, which is a really stupid idea, but what's the status of it?
It's very much alive. I will say that work group that's been looking at that has talked about any number of ways to raise revenue from the bicycle mode, if you will. And I'm going to paraphrase the 2 statements about it. One is, if there's not bicycle-based revenue in the package will not move forward. And the other statement is, from the bicycle advocates, they don't like any of the proposals, but the sales tax at the point of sale on new adult bicycles is the least of all evils. And that's the way they phrased it. That they'll accept that because they recognize that they need to start contributing in some way. And they're proposing, again, a point of sale tax on new bicycles, adult bicycles only.
It's called symbolism.
Maybe they'll add an exemption on your tax form for flat tires. You know, if the bike pass unmaintained.
So they're not charging for children's bikes?
No.
For some reason?
No, just adults. Yeah.
Because that,
They're actually talking about, based on wheel size, 20-inch and above, so you could go get an adult bike Friday and not pay. But that's another.
yeah, you see the entire market shift to small
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I listen to Sid quite a bit on this. He spends a lot of time up there, and a lot of the advice he gives. But I wish I was still in the state legislature, and I'll tell you why. I drove to San Francisco not too long ago, and when I came home, about 2 days later, I got a bill in the mail for driving across the Golden Gate Bridge. So we could do something like that. Perry Street Bridge, send people a bill in the mail.
They take pictures, yeah.
Denver does.
Wow. How much was the bill?
$7.50. And
they do it by your license.
yeah.
That's wild.
So we could check. We could do the interstate bridge coming into Oregon and check for Washington Plains.
And toll roads do work quite well. I did a lot for the European roads when I was there, because they put toll roads in about every 50 to 100 miles, and you're paying a new toll. And they do put them where you don't have any choice to go anyway, so it's not as if you're going to go through a small town and avoid it. You're going to be on the interstate, and they do work, and they do catch all of us visitors
Yes.
And they don't slow traffic down too much, right?
No, they don't, because they're not, yeah.
There's no toll booth anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw one more thing out there that's not on that list, which is also the committee is talking about what they're coined the sunny day fuel tax. I didn't pass this out, but basically there's a concept out there that they want to set a certain level of fuel price, and this presentation goes through $2.20 per gallon, $2.50, $2.70, et cetera, and set a baseline for fuel prices, and if say it's $2.50, and if the fuel price is above that, all the state collects is the gas tax. If the fuel price falls below that, the state collects the increment. In other words, the fuel price in Oregon would never fall below $2.50. And the state would get the increment if it did on the national market. So I want to move on to, I'm going to hopefully get to this one, although we may be running over. This is important. But before we get to that, I want to move on to funding Beltline improvements. We've talked about that a little bit, and the reason we need to talk about it more is because the Joint Committee has stressed, as I told you last month, local skin in the game. And Franny touched on it earlier today, local match in order to build these big highway improvements. Portland Metro came into this legislative session asking for nearly a $2 billion package of improvements in the metro area up there, if you include the light rail line. And they came out and said, from the start, we'll pay for 50% of it if you'll pay for 50% of it. Metro and TriMet will raise half the revenue if the state will raise the other half. And that has set the bar and the expectation. Not that it has to be 50-50 everywhere else, but it's set the expectation that if you're going to do these big things, there has to be local skin in the game. And so what has been stated from the outset is that the statutory language in the bill is going to enable all 8 Oregon MPOs, and I passed this little piece of paper out, it's going to enable all 8 Oregon MPOs to have regional taxing authority for transportation purposes. And they're going to set up new taxing districts in the statutory language. There's 2 ways that that district can be used. One is the state can impose a surcharge, and they're likely to do that for the Portland area in this bill. They're likely to increase the gas tax statewide by, say, 11 cents and impose a surcharge in Portland of an additional 8 cents. Those are numbers that are being tossed about right now. The other thing that this taxing authority in these new taxing districts would do would enable us to locally self-impose a new revenue source for transportation if we so choose. It would give us taxing authority not just as a gas tax, but also vehicle registration fee and maybe a number of other things. The details aren't complete yet. I talked with Senator Boquist about this quite a bit yesterday, and what is being proposed and what the legislative lawyers are already drafting up is generic statutory language to establish this for all 8 MPOs, but it can be unique to each MPO if we have certain language, certain verbiage, as he put it, that we want for our taxing district. Portland Metro is writing their verbiage for how they want their taxing district to be formed and governed. And he said, if you want yours formed at a certain boundary and governed a certain way, get me the language. Get it before April 21st if you want it in the draft. Get it before June 1st if you want it amended before it goes to the House floor. That's a very tight timeline.
Yes.
He wants, and the committee wants, this taxing district to adhere as close to the MPO boundary as possible, and certainly the MPO boundary makes sense, and there is a governing board for the MPO between you and the Alcog Board of Directors jointly, but predominantly has been delegated to this body here. And so as Brenda and I have talked about this, and a lot of this was just developing last night, we believe that we need head nods from you today to basically see what the generic language is they write in that would affect or create a taxing district for us. We hopefully would have that by April 21st at the latest, and then we would come back to you next month with a formal request of whether that was acceptable or whether we wanted to have them amended specific to our area in some way. Brenda, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, as I said before, this is an opportunity to have that authority be put in place. I don't believe we could go back later in the future and ask for it if it wasn't. And so we want to give this body the opportunity to weigh in. There isn't enough time, I think, to have you each go back to your individual jurisdictions to determine what the specific language will be. And so Paul and I discussed it, and we think that we'll see what the generic language is, bring that back to this group, so as you have some time to discuss with your individual jurisdictions what makes sense. And we still have time to have that bill amended. We've been looking at different scenarios. One thing that I'll be looking at is, as you know, the Lane Council of Governments is the MPO, and the LCOG board is the governing body of the MPO, but a couple of decades ago, they delegated that authority to another body, the MPC. What we want to look at is what does the language need to look like in order for the MPC, if this is the governing body that you all decide you would like to have authority over that taxing district, what does the language need to look like in order to make sure that that authority sits with this body instead of the LCOG board? And so that's something I'm going to be looking at. I'll bring that information back to you.
Okay. Sid?
So my question is, going through the STP process, how would a taxing district as part of the MPO coordinate with the Act? Well, I think those is, I would ask that you, I know we're in a time crunch here, but I would ask that you take a look at this, because when we fight for STP money, we have this, this agreement between, what the MPO puts forth, the Act puts forth. But when all of a sudden you become a taxing district, what's that relationship going to look like? And I think I'm just going to say that I might be a little concerned until I see what that language would look like at this point in time. But what's the time frame on this?
The bill has
yesterday.
The bill has to be drafted by April 21st, and
okay.
We really only have 6 weeks after that to effectively amend it.
2 weeks.
So we're talking right. Okay. Is there a way that you can, Franny? You want to? I'm gonna ask. I think it's important for Franny and Bill maybe to work with you on this. This relationship.
And I've been working with Alex. Matter of fact, Alex was with me with Senator Boquist yesterday,
okay.
and others, and we're having some staff meetings, another one next Tuesday, on this specific topic.
I'd be interested in seeing the language
yes.
on that relationship. That is key. I know we've got to make a decision. We've got to move this out. But I just want to raise that just to, and I don't care if you want to communicate to us via email, whatever the case may be. I don't know on this. I know we've got to make a decision, got to get it moving quickly, but I'm just going to ask that somehow there's this coordination needs to continue to be positive.
Yes.
All right, that's it.
Yes, John and then Gary.
I just have a couple clarifying questions on what this actually does. So essentially what this would say is that the MPC, this body here, can choose to be the governing body for taxing the county on to collect transportation dollars.
For taxing the taxing district and the boundary that
right, but essentially the district. So this the MPC can choose to be that governing body over that versus the LCOG board. So I'm not sure who gets to choose that. And then would it be that just the elected officials on this board get to choose that, or just anybody that's on that board?
Those are all good questions that are in play, and what Senator Boquist said yesterday is that the generic language will essentially establish the taxing district for an MPO and will create the governing body for that taxing district as the MPO governing board. So if we don't ask for something different, yes, this MPO boundary would be a new taxing district, and yes, either this body or the LCOG board, but presumably this body would be the taxing governing body. That's the generic language.
It just sets up interesting dynamics, I think, at any governing body. I mean, it becomes critical then who the mayor chooses to appoint on this board. So, I mean, it's just sort of an interesting.
It's very different, but they are intent on doing this.
Yes, yes. Gary and then Hillary.
So, Paul, I guess my question is, based on the timeline, should we follow the directive of when in doubt, plagiarize? In other words, I didn't finish, by the way, but what I meant by that was, is there another MPO that's further along on this process, or we could cooperate with to basically use the same language or something real similar?
Not immediately. My understanding, again, from what I've had and what Senator Broquist and I discussed yesterday is that Metro, and not just Portland Metro, but all of the entities involved in that area have a committee of lawyers drafting their preferred language. Salem is not yet acting on this, and the other 5 MPOs have been totally silent. And I'm not sure that Metro is the best model for us.
Yeah. It's a tough dynamic because you want to be in on it, and you want to do the work, and you want to do it right the first time, but you're doing it from scratch in a 11-day period.
Right, so we believe that the language that will come out, the generic language, will say that the taxing authority boundary will be, the taxing district will be the MPO boundary, and that the taxing authority, the governing board of that taxing district will be the governing body of the MPO, which in this case is this body, the MPC. There are a number of reasons that the LCOG board doesn't make sense as the governing body of that taxing district. Primarily, there are 34 members on the LCOG board, all throughout the county, including special districts, school districts, a port, a community college, and so it doesn't make sense. But that's something that I'll need to take a look at to see whether or not this type of authority was contemplated when the LCOG board delegated their policymaking authority to this body, and so I'll be taking a look at that. But we think that the language will be generic enough to say it's the MPO boundary and it's the governing body, assuming it's this body, that has the authority over that taxing districts. And the question to you becomes, are you okay with that, or is there some modification to that generic language that you want? That's why we're going to ask you to start having those conversations within your jurisdictions about what makes sense, so that you can make a formal decision here next month before the bill has to be amended.
Well, we amended it to say parks instead of transportation.
That would be a no. I did have one follow-up, if I could. So if we just make that general statement, then do we have until June 21st or a later date to hash out what all the details are?
No.
Okay, because I heard you say June 21st was
April
the amendment.
21st and June 1st.
June 1st, okay.
Is there a consortium meeting
Thank
between
you.
now and then?
We are bringing this to OMPOC's attention, but it really is a matter for each MPO to determine on their own.
Yeah.
But yes, we are working with OMPOC on it also.
Hillary, Gino, and then Lucy.
Okay, I think this is very, very important, and it's important that we get on board with this. But my concern is kind of like Sid's, is that with the act or the LCOG board, they're representing all the jurisdictions of Lane County. We can't tax without representation, so that if we're going to put any taxing measures in, they perhaps need to be able to opt out if they don't want it. I think you have to address that.
This is the MPO, well, the generic language would be that the taxing district would be the MPO boundary only, so it wouldn't extend beyond the, right.
Okay, that's the part I missed, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
okay. What if they wanted to be included?
No.
Well,
Well, now frankly, that's one of the questions that we're essentially asking you, because Portland, who is a little further along, looked at their 3 possible boundaries, and they looked at their 3 possible boundaries as either the NPO boundary, which is the smallest of the 3, or the Tri-Met service boundary, which is larger, or the Port of Portland boundary, which is even larger and goes all the way to the river. They're now actually going to probably choose the Tri-Met boundary. We have options. We could say the MPO boundary, the LTD service boundary, the Lane County boundary, Or Brendan even mentioned our four-county economic development
We have
district
a four-county economic development district, and
with the governing board.
that'd be hurting cats for sure.
We think for two reasons the MPO boundary it makes the most sense. Number one, simplicity, and there's a governing board here already. Number two, the legislators have said they want it to adhere to the MPO as much as possible.
Question? I'm out of order.
Yeah, you're out of order.
I'm out of order.
Do you need to ask her right now, or do you want to go?
Who's next?
It's Gino.
Gino should go first.
Paul,
And
any
Lucy.
sideboards on the taxing authority, could be property taxes?
Yes, that's my question.
To be determined, but at this point, we believe that property taxes exempt from compression are still on the table.
Yeah.
That is what TriMet wants to use.
And it could be for capital bond, could be for operating.
Correct.
Interesting. Operating would be exempt from compression.
No, but capital would be.
Okay. I had Lucy, and then, did you want to come back?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, thank you. So, if this legislation passes and we do nothing, we automatically become a taxing district as an MPO.
I believe we would automatically be established as a taxing district. We would not ever have to self-impose a tax, but the state would have the option to impose regional surcharges on us.
And what we're hearing is that unless we provide skin in the game for our big projects, the state wouldn't be willing to fund those projects.
So right now,
It's the golden rule.
Yeah, look out.
and let me explain a little bit about where Portland is coming from. Portland came in originally saying that we would pay 50-50 and we will self-impose our 50%. They've since switched their position a little bit because they have such a large 50%, almost $1 billion, that they said, no, we'd prefer it happen this way. We would prefer that the state provide 50% through the state gas tax, that they impose on us a regional surcharge that would generate roughly 25%, and then TriMet's going to go out for this ballot measure, probably property-based, to generate the other 25%. And so they're looking at using all three mechanisms. One of the things that we've talked about is with Beltline, it's likely not going to get funded in the next 10 or for more years unless we contribute some regional revenue towards it. How can we do that? Well, we can ask the state to impose a surcharge on our region, or we can self-impose it under this new taxing district, assuming it's formed. But if we want it built in the early years, and it would be a very quick turnaround to self-impose, we might say, go ahead and impose the regional surcharge on us so we can get this built soon, and then we'll have the taxing authority to do more later.
Just a clarification, so one on the sidebars, is it only for transportation-related projects, so that we can't tax everybody for parks? That panel lots to do.
Yeah,
And
that's
then,
wise.
and I think it's an interesting shift to the political risk, obviously. It's kind of a big piece of the,
Yes.
so this body is the one that takes the risk of saying yay and nay to a project as opposed to the state choosing to fund it with their vote. So it's an interesting,
That's good.
it's a good idea or interesting idea.
This comes down, this is Portland Metro, and this is
yes,
Portland
it is.
Metro. And this is Betsy Johnson saying, you mean you'll give yourself a tax increase to fund the Rose Quarter? Great, we're all in. This is what this is. And so it's going to come down to us. This is going to go to every part of the state now. This is Portland Metro. This is where this all came from.
Yes, it is.
And we're now going to, so it's going to hit every part of the state. So Hillary, you're right. We have to get on board. We have no choice. We have to get on board so we can write our own language.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
and-
what we have to do.
And when we were at the Transportation Policy Group, it really was presented that Portland Metro would do it, and then everybody could maybe opt in at some point.
Or not get a project.
Or not
Yeah,
get
or
a
not get a
project,
project.
yes. So, but it was presented that way in that sort of,
Yep.
we could do it, and then you guys could just get no
Then you're going to
money.
tax yourself to get the project.
So if I may, I'm going to use,
Yeah, and we're running way over, so what I'm gonna propose is, unless there's something really big on these last little updates, is that we wait.
We can wait on those. Can I touch on this last handout and segue from Commissioner
Yeah, well,
Michael's comment?
okay, so, but we're going to do, what's the action on this?
We are going to get you the draft language as soon as
The
possible.
generic language.
Please start
Okay.
having these conversations in your jurisdictions.
Yes.
We will bring that to you for formal decision-making, hopefully at the next meeting.
Okay, so
and
we should be
along with
prepared to
some
see something.
additional information.
Okay, the more clear information, the better about them, particularly the impacts of what this will mean. Okay.
So the decision-making that both Commissioner and you referred to is interesting, and it's a good segue into this. There's a lot of interest by the committee to moving the decision-making on projects and funding from ODOT to OTC. This is the accountability work group report that was just released last night. This is the work group that was formed later in the process to look at essentially the ODOT management audit and other processes. It was for the most part a closed meeting work group, and their recommendations last night, I want to just point out what's in this real quick. The brown pages contain the 4 key recommendations. Following many of them, you'll see blue pages which provide details under the 4 primary recommendations. It's significant if you go through this in that it says, let's change the appointment of the ODOT director from the governor to the OTC. Let's give OTC a lot of more governance and authority by, number 1, no longer having them staffed by ODOT, but having them have their own independent staff. By moving the ODOT auditor from ODOT to the OTC. By expanding the OTC membership to include more representation. And then that continues on for several pages about continuing or expanding the OTC authority. Recommendation number 3 is give more legislative direction to what happens with the transportation dollars. And then recommendation 4, near the back, is be more transparent with information. So you can just look through that.
So, this will be, this is some great meeting, I can tell.
It was a big deal last night.
I can definitely see that. Yeah, we're gonna have to, yes, that, I would highly recommend going through this thoroughly and figuring out the impacts of that and having maybe some more information from
We will come back to you.
what does this mean? Okay, so I'm looking at follow-up, and I know that everybody's probably anxious to leave. I'm thinking there's not a lot, OMPOC hasn't met yet, and there's, is there any other updates? Yes,
Just a real quick one, that House Bill 2131, which would change the structure of the TriMet and LTD board, is in committee and doesn't have a hearing scheduled, so it's kind of on the back burner now.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have an ACT meeting next week. We'll talk about this whole thing, I'm sure. I wanted to let you know that Commissioner Lohman of the OTC is getting termed out, so there'll be another vacancy on the OTC. There may be an opportunity to, get someone from this area again. It would be nice.
And it has to be a Democrat.
Oh,
No, it does.
okay.
Commissioner Lohman's a Democrat, so it has to be a Democrat so that's an important piece to know on that.
And I just wanted to mention really quick that ODOT really cares a lot about pedestrian safety and have provided safety enforcement grants to communities. Springfield, Eugene, and Coburg have jumped up on those, and there'll be kind of sting operations at pedestrian crossings where there'll be police looking out, and if a car goes through a pedestrian crossing, they're busted. So just that's coming forward.
Okay, one comment real quick, Paul, on that piece that you were giving us about giving the OTC a lot more power. I have a lot of concerns about that. It was just 2 years ago, I think, that an OTC member, fairly new one, but went around all the rules on the reviewing process of funding projects and upset the apple cart, and I think the governor eventually had to retire that person. And that's a danger, I think, sometime of taking inexperienced people and putting them in the absolute top management positions for decision making. So, yeah, I think it has to be balanced somehow.
Yes, AJ.
Just lastly, just want to announce that registration is open for the Business Commute Challenge, so encourage your agencies, your respective, please sign up. It's very successful, supports our local businesses. Thank you.
Great. Okay, is that pretty much what we?
Yes, I just have one thing, it's just the request. On 4 of the items on the agenda today, we had public hearing, and as we discussed, that comment period is open till the end of the month, and then we'll bring this back to this group for decision. Those are items 6C, D, E, and F, and I'm getting the acronym, UPWP, RTP, MTIP, and air quality. We would like not to have to send this entire packet out to you again.
Yes.
If you wouldn't mind keeping those attachments and bringing them back to the next meeting, we would greatly appreciate it. Or like Jano, have them electronically, that would post it on our website. So just so you know, we will not be sending those out to you again next month.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, no
So with
FedEx.
that, next, May 4th, our next meeting's in Eugene.
In Eugene, and please note, I highlighted coming up July in Coburg, and I highlighted August because we had to switch that. If you already put on your calendar in August for Eugene, we had to move it to Springfield. We'll remind you again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. We're adjourned.
Thank you.